I found the post from studentdoctor.net. The post is Biochem Question, where does proton come from in lactic acidosis? So this topic is not made by me. This is a real post, in which I using Google to find this post. And I will let you know, I received my PhD from University of New Mexico 12 years ago. See here. So question is, his nickname is Pizza 100. Right? Hi everyone. During heavy exercise, muscle get additional energy by converting glucose to pyruvate in glycolysis. The pyruvate then gets converted to lactate, the anion form of lactic acid, to free up the NAD+ for the next cycle of glycolysis. I don't understand where additional proton come from that would lower the blood pH and cause acidosis. The process above produce lactate, not lactic acid. Please help clarify this. So I believe you already learned this kind of thing from exercise physiology. You guys can answer it right. It doesn't make sense. Who should answer this kind of question? This is during heavy exercise. So I believe kinesiology student must answer. In the near future, you will be a coach, exercise specialist, or exercise physiologist, or physical education teacher, or athletic trainer, or strength and conditioning specialist. You'll have this kind of question from your client or athlete or student. Even you would like to work with like wearable device, so you must answer this kind of question. I believe the owner, right, they are very educated people, so they can ask this question to you too. So somebody respond to his initial question. At physiological pH, lactic acid loses its proton and become lactate. So this is kind of a traditional belief. And another person said, pKa means the acid dissociation constant. pKa for lactic acid is 3.86. So at physiological pH is around 7.4. So pH higher than pKa is right. See, 3.86, but this one is 7.4. So this is higher. So majority of lactic acid will exist in its dissociation form. So it means physiological pH higher than this constant. So lactic acid lose proton and become lactate. But this is traditional belief. So Pizza 100, so he speak like this. I understand that lactic acid turn into lactate and proton at physiological condition. What I don't understand is where does lactic acid come from? The process of regenerating NAD+ for glycolysis involves turning pyruvate into lactate, not lactic acid. Lactate does not have proton to lower the pH. I think he learned very well, right? I believe you guys learn like this is right. So it's a perfect question. Because during glycolysis, pyruvate become lactate, not lactic acid, is right? But to respond previous, they just talk about lactic acid. But he just keep asking, I understand, but where from lactic acid, right? Pyruvate become lactate, not lactic acid, like this kind of approaching. So Renaissance man respond like this. This is actually a pretty good question. My biochem professor here has a problem with the term lactic acid acidosis. We had a few slides where he argued that the hydrogen ion are the product of ATP hydrolysis, How about class? You guys already learned from me, right? And that high level of lactate are only a marker for the acidosis. He then said that this is a hotly contested topic in biochemistry. I have no idea whether that is true, but his soapbox rant and PowerPoint slide made sense. So how about class? I think you can say that is right. Instead of my biochem professor, my exercise physics professor said. Does it make sense? Does it make sense? And another one, soapbox rant. I was a little bit confused. What does it mean, soapbox rant? So I just Googled, oh, this one, oh, like this. So even somebody say their opinion, right? They use soapbox, but this is right, Does it make sense? Does it make sense, right? So this is not like only this picture. Actually, is your future in the near future, in the your future. After graduation, you have this kind of a challenge. So you need to answer. You need to answer. And next one, how about this person said, ooh, God, it might be. Actually, I could not understand what does it mean. And see the post above, and this might help too. I think below is right. So this Wikipedia, right? This person said, please read this Wikipedia. So I clicked this Wikipedia, but actually this is pretty good, right? But when I found this Wikipedia, at that time, 2015, September 3rd, right? So at that time, this one is pretty good. But yesterday I checked this Wikipedia, oh my goodness. Some people updated, but that is not good. It's not anymore good. So if you click right now, actually it's incorrect. 2015, most of the content were pretty better than 2021. And first, lactic acidosis is not really good terminology. So correct terminology is metabolic acidosis, but Wikipedia at that time is like argue this lactic acidosis, and they use this one as like to argue this terminology. But right now, 2021, oh, they really write down lactic acid. That is not really correct. So it's a little bit different than 2015 as right now. So 2015 content is like this. Most cells in the body normally metabolize glucose to form water and carbon dioxide in a two-step process. I think, did you remember? Fat become water and CO2, is right? Carbohydrate same, is become water and carbon dioxide. But glucose has two metabolic pathway, is right? So first, glucose is broken down to pyruvate through glycolysis. Then mitochondria oxidize the pyruvate into water and carbon dioxide by means of T-cell cycle and oxidative phosphorylation, etc. is right. Where the energy in ATP is used during cell work via ATP hydrolysis, hydrogen ion, proton, right, are released. Well, I think its explanation is really good. The mitochondria normally incorporate these free hydrogen nuclei back into ATP, thus preventing buildup of unbound hydrogen cation and maintain neutral pH. So ATP hydrolysis release proton, but mitochondria use this proton to resynthesize ATP. So there are no like metabolic acidosis occur in our muscle cell because of mitochondria. That doesn't make sense. You already learned, is right? And if oxygen supply is inadequate, so hypoxia, the mitochondria are unable to continue ATP synthesis at a rate sufficient to supply the cell with the required ATP. In this situation, glycolysis increases to provide additional ATP, and excess pyruvate produced is converted into lactate and released from the cell into the bloodstream, where it accumulates over time. While increased glycolysis helps compensate for less ATP from oxidative phosphorylation, it cannot bind the hydrogen cation that result from ATP hydrolysis. Therefore, hydrogen cation concentration rise and cause acidosis. Is right? The excess hydrogen cation produced during lactic acidosis are widely believed to actually derive from production of lactic acid. This is incorrect. Yes, I agree. This is incorrect. As cells do not produce lactic acid, see, our cells do not produce lactic acid. Pyruvate is converted directly into lactate, the anionic form of lactic acid. So pyruvate is converted directly into lactate, not lactic acid. When excess intracellular lactate is released into the blood, maintenance of electroneutrality of blood requires that a cation be released into the blood as well. This can reduce blood pH. Glycolysis coupled with lactate production is neutral in the sense that it does not produce excess hydrogen cation. However, pyruvate production does produce them. Lactate production is buffered intracellularly. Example, the lactate-producing enzyme lactate dehydrogenases bind hydrogen cations per pyruvate molecule converted. Class, did you remember this hydrogen cation from which step? Step 6 of glycolysis is right. When such buffer system becomes saturated, cell will transport lactate into the bloodstream. See, pyruvate and proton become lactate, but this lactate it should be go out of the muscle into the bloodstream, is right? So hypoxia certainly causes both a buildup of lactate and acidification. This proton from ATP hydrolysis, right? And lactate is therefore good marker, not cause and effect, right? It's a good marker of hypoxia, but lactate itself is not the cause of a lower pH. And reference is 8. Please see here, reference is 8. Number 8 is a reference of this one. There is a view that during exercise and critical illness, lactate production is not generated by lack of oxygen, but by catecholamine-driven glycolysis, and that the lactate serves as an energy source for other tissue. So this is a reference 8. Oh, reference 8 is a Robert, right? This is the first author, and the title is Biochemistry of Exercise-Induced Metabolic Acidosis. If you go to our Canvas, come to our Canvas website, I already post this article. So I think it's a pizza 100 read this Wikipedia, is right, and he respond like this. Thanks for the reply, Renaissance man. Wikipedia says many sources disagree to where the proton come from. Can we at least confirm that excess glycolysis and production of lactate does produce proton and lower the blood pH? I wonder the term acidosis is actually a decrease in blood pH at all. And I said, my bad son. I could not understand what does it mean. I didn't get what he was asking at first. Should I have read the whole question? So Renaissance man is right. Oh no, it's a different person. Yes, I believe that is correct. The proton is there. The dispute is just over where it's coming from. The acidosis is a decrease in blood pH. Oh, it means the acidosis is a decrease in blood pH. But the problem is where this proton from is right. Because this kind of question. So somebody said like this, Spectre GT260. His response like this. I like it. Water. There is always water in the system to provide proton. Biologists have a bad habit of not balancing proton from aqueous equation. I wonder what the pK of NAD plus is? Someone look up the reduction reaction using NADH. NADH. I bet there are unaccount for water and hydrogen in this. So it's not like not really correct, but he said water. Can you guess this water from where? And another one, KP's crew. Water in the system can provide proton to molecule, but that wouldn't change the pH of the solution. Right? So they know water is kind of like a release proton, but they didn't really talk about ATP hydrolysis, right? Yes, when ATP broke down, right, we need water, right? Doesn't make sense? So I think it's very close. They are very close to find proton from where? They said water, but they didn't mention is ATP hydrolysis, but they are very close. They are very close. Yes, I can say it's a huge argument. I believe every responder and initiator, they are very educated people, right? But that is a huge argument. So how about tough, right? So yeah, this person said is right. It's very close. It's very close, right? So is here is a pyruvate, NADS plus proton, but I believe this person include water. So water plus proton we call hydronium. But I can say it look like this is right, but I can say pyruvate plus NAD plus proton become lactate plus NAD plus. Like this. Doesn't make sense? Doesn't make sense? Yeah, just take out each side water is exactly you learn from step 6 of glycolysis. Pyruvate with 2 proton from step 6, 2 electron, right? It's become lactate. Exact same equation. So, which clearly show that lactate formation actually compensate for the underlying metabolic acidosis by taking a proton. It means whenever we have lactate, actually we consume proton. See, there are no protons, right? Doesn't make sense. And another one, there is also interesting because in metabolic acidosis, according to the Lachalet principle, you would be driving the equilibrium to the right because of the surplus of a proton and therefore increase lactate formation. It means if you have more proton, we have more lactate. It doesn't make sense. If we have more proton, pyruvate consume proton become lactate. So it means if we have more lactate, we have less proton. Doesn't make sense. And again, this person respond. Again, one of the source of a proton, that was actually our question is right. From the metabolic acidosis is from ATP hydrolysis. Finally, they have a conclusion, but you guys already learned, right? As someone point out, you can read about this in this review. Oh, it means this review article talk about proton from ATP hydrolysis is right. So again, this article is this article. So it sounds like Wikipedia talk about this article as well as the last person talk about lactate formation as well as ATP hydrolysis is recommend this article is right. And I already post this article on Canvas website. And this article, right, I just open here a 15-page article. This is a first abstract and the title, Biochemistry of Exercise Induced Metabolic Acidosis. Please watch here. The first author, Robert A. Roberts. Can you guess his institution? Yes, actually his institution is the University of New Mexico. So actually he is my professor. So I learned from him. So this is why I teach metabolic acidosis. And I said lactic acid is incorrect because I'm the student. I was student of him. So I believe I explained very well to you guys. But still, I just let you know this is a huge argument. But however, how about like this? Because this person is my professor, Dr. Gon's professor, maybe you can think, Dr. Gon, because you are his student, So this is why you just keep talking about lactic acid is incorrect. But how about you and him? Is it right? Any other professor, you can ask to me, right? Doesn't make sense. Any other professor talk about like metabolic lactic acid is incorrect, like this kind of approach is right. How about like this? His name is George Brook, Dr. George Brook. He's very popular exercise physiologist. Could you see his research expertise and interest? Exercise and environment physiology is right. Metabolism, lactate shuttle, and crossover concept lactic acidosis. It looks like he's really expert in lactate. Doesn't make sense? And exercise. And UC Berkeley, right? UC Berkeley. So I believe if he agree, right, maybe you can trust me, right? Doesn't make sense. I believe you trust me, but just I want to show you another person, another popular, is a real researcher talk about lactate or lactic acid. Just I want to share this YouTube video.
Our various cells, including the muscle, then really is the limiting factor in the sense where, because if you don't have enough oxygen there, the lactate you produce isn't going to get used. It's going to pile up. Can you explain? Because when our muscles produce lactate, and
all the cells,
our lymphocytes,
our red blood cells are producing.
Right. I'm talking about it in the context of exercise because I think that's what people mostly relate it to. But when we do produce, lactate, how does it get converted into lactic acid?
Well, it's this, if you look at the glycolytic pathway, it actually makes lactate. But lactate is a pretty strong acid, so it associates with water, and a certain amount of acidosis, though, will be associated with the lactate itself. But glycolysis actually makes lactate, not lactic acid. The acidosis, the hydrogen ions come from other processes, like the splitting of ATP, which is our high energy source. When we split that, we liberate a proton. So when you're splitting your ATP and you're not able to keep it its level high, you're going to develop protons. And the lactate's going to be there, and people are going to associate the proton with the lactate and call it lactic acid. This is a big misnomer and big mistake in biology.
So I think he agree with me is right. So I believe, right, this lecture is really helping you to understand the difference between lactate and lactic acid, and the difference metabolic acidosis and lactic acidosis. So I believe this is a really good lecture for you. Thank you very much.